The Rondoli Sisters, Guy de Maupassant. No, said Pierre Jouvent, I am not acquainted with Italy. Though I've twice attempted to reach it, each time I was halted at the border, so thoroughly that further progress became impossible. Yet those two failed ventures left me with a haunting impression of the customs of that enchanting land. All that remains is to acquaint myself with its cities, its museums, and the masterpieces of art that abound in that region. At the first convenient opportunity, I shall once again attempt to penetrate that elusive territory. You don't understand? Let me explain. In 1874, I was seized by a burning desire to see Venice, Florence, Rome, and Naples. This longing overtook me in mid-June, when spring's sap rises into the soul, awakening a thirst for travel and love. But I am no devotee of travel. Changing one's location, in my view, is both futile and exhausting. Nights spent on trains, sleep shattered by the jolting of the carriage, which brings headaches and aches throughout the body, the sensation of utter ruin upon waking in that moving box, unwashed skin, airborne grime clogging the eyes and hair, the stench of coal one is forced to inhale, vile meals in drafty station buffet, all of this, to me, is a repugnant prelude to a supposedly pleasurable journey. And after this railway overture comes the dreariness of the hotel, a vast place, teeming with people, yet somehow desolate. A strange, cheerless room, a suspicious bed. My own bed is what I cherish most. It is the sanctuary of our lives. To it we entrust our weary, naked bodies, and it restores them, cradling them in white sheets and the warmth of downy blankets. There we find the sweetest hours of life, hours of love and sleep. The bed is sacred. We must revere it, honor it, and love it as the finest, most comforting thing we possess on earth. In a hotel, I cannot lift the sheet without a shudder of disgust. Who lay here last night? What filthy, repulsive people slept on these mattresses? I think of all the loathsome creatures one encounters daily, hideous hunchbacks, pimpled bodies, grimy hands, not to mention feet and other things. I think of those who reek of garlic or human sweat. I think of the deformed, the mangy, the sick, oozing perspiration, of all the filth and vileness of humanity. All of that has passed through the bed I am meant to sleep in. And I begin to feel ill the moment I slip a foot beneath the covers. And hotel dinners, long meals at the table d'hôte among unbearable and absurd people, or else dreadful solitary suppers at a restaurant table, by the dim light of a candle under a paper shade. And the dreary evenings in a strange city. What could be more sorrowful than nightfall in an unfamiliar place? You wander aimlessly, amid movement and bustle that feel dreamlike and overwhelming. You gaze at faces you've never seen and never will again, hear voices speaking of things that mean nothing to you, in a language you do not understand. You feel terribly lost. Your heart tightens, your legs weaken, your soul is weighed down. You walk as if fleeing something, anything to avoid returning to the hotel, where you feel even lonelier, for there you are, home, but it is a home for anyone who pays. And finally you collapse into a chair at a brightly lit cafe, where the gilding and lights oppress you more than the darkness of the street. Sitting before a sticky mug of beer, served by a bustling waiter, you feel such repulsive solitude that a mad urge seizes you, to flee anywhere, just not here, not at this marble table beneath the blinding chandelier. And suddenly you realize, you are always and everywhere alone in this world, and the familiar encounters in known places are but an illusion of human brotherhood. In such moments of abandonment, of bleak solitude in a foreign city, the mind works with rare clarity, independence, and depth. And then, in a single glance, you take in the whole of life, seeing it not through the rose-tinted glasses of eternal hope, but stripped of the illusions of habit, without the expectation of the happiness that forever eludes us. Only when you've gone far away do you begin to grasp how close, confined, and trivial everything around you truly is. Only in the pursuit of the unknown do you notice how ordinary and fleeting it all seems. Only by wandering the earth do you realize how narrow and monotonous this world really is. Ah, those gloomy evenings spent aimlessly roaming foreign streets, I've lived through them. And it is those evenings I fear more than anything else in the world. That is why, unable to bring myself to travel to Italy alone, I persuaded my friend Paul Pavoli to come with me. You know Paul. For him, the whole world, all of life, resides in a woman. There are many men like that. Everything that makes life poetic and vivid, he associates solely with their presence. The earth is worth existing only because they live upon it, the sun shines and warms because it illuminates their faces. The air is pleasant because it caresses their skin and plays with the curls at their temples. The moon is enchanting because it stirs dreams in them and lends love its languid charm. Women alone inspire Paul, all his thoughts, desires, and hopes are directed toward them. A poet once mocked such men. Of all men, I most despise the languid poet. He gazes at a star, and whispers a name. Beside him always, Ninon or Lisette, without her, the sky would seem empty and tame. These odd fellows spend their days in vain, trying to teach others to love nature's grace, a bonnet pinned to a green hill's manner, a skirt tied to trees in a field's embrace. He'll never hear your wondrous songs, O nature, your immortal, ringing voice so pure, who's never walked alone through silent pasture, who dreams of women while the woods murmur. When I spoke to Paul about Italy, he flatly refused to leave Paris. But I began painting him pictures of possible adventures, mentioned that Italian women were said to be charming, and promised refined pleasures in Naples thanks to my recommendation to Signor Michele Amoroso, a man quite useful to foreigners. Paul gave in to temptation. We boarded the express train on Thursday evening, June 26. At that time of year, few travel south, and the carriage was ours alone. Our mood was sour, regret at leaving Paris, dissatisfaction with our decision, longing for the shady groves of Marly, the beautiful Seine, the gentle banks, the glorious days of boating and the evenings when it was so sweet to doze on the shore as night descended. Paul curled up in a corner and, as the train began to move, muttered, "What a foolish idea, this trip." Since it was too late to turn back, I replied, "We should have stayed." He said nothing, but his face was so sullen I could barely suppress a laugh. Paul, without question, resembles a squirrel. Each of us carries traces of some animal, a vestige of our primal lineage. How many people have bulldog jaws, goatish, rabbit-like, fox-like, equine, or bovine heads? Paul is a squirrel-turned man. He has the same lively eyes, reddish fur, pointed nose, small, agile, nimble body. In all his gestures, movements, and mannerisms, there's something that recalls his former animal existence. Eventually, we both fell asleep, as one sleeps on a train, fitfully, with jolts, neck cramps, and sudden stops. We awoke as the train sped along the banks of the Rhône. Through the window burst the chirring of cicadas, that continuous, ringing chirr that seems the voice of the sun-scorched earth itself, the song of Provence. It breathed into our faces, our chests, our souls, a joyful sensation of the south, the scent of hot, stony soil, homeland of the squat olive tree with its silver-green leaves. When the train stopped at a station, a railwayman dashed past the cars, shouting "Valence" in a true local accent. That "Valence," like the chirring of the cicadas, made us feel the taste of Provence in our very bones. Until Marseille, nothing new. In Marseille, we stepped out for breakfast at the buffet. When we returned to the carriage, a woman was already seated inside. Paul shot me a delighted glance, instinctively twirled his short mustache, smoothed his hair, disheveled from the night, by running his fingers through it like a comb. Then he sat down opposite the stranger. Whenever a new face appears before me, on the road or in society, I'm seized by an irresistible urge to understand what soul, what mind, what character lies behind those features. She was a young woman, very young. And quite pretty, undoubtedly a daughter of the South. She had marvelous eyes, magnificent black hair, thick, wavy, slightly curled, so heavy that one could feel its weight just by looking at it. Dressed in bright, southern fashion, with a touch of garishness, she seemed a bit vulgar. Her features were regular, but lacked that grace, that subtle elegance, that refinement which seems innate to children of aristocracy and marks the presence of nobler blood. Her bracelets were far too wide to pass for gold, and the transparent stones in her earrings, far too large to be mistaken for diamonds. There was something unmistakably common in her appearance. One sensed she was used to speaking loudly, and at the slightest provocation, shouting, her words accompanied by wild gesticulation. The train began to move. She sat motionless, her gaze fixed ahead with a sullen expression of grievance and irritation. She didn't even glance at us. Paul began speaking to me, carefully crafting impressive phrases, hoping to catch her attention, to dazzle with wit, to overwhelm with eloquence, like a merchant displaying his finest wares to spark a buyer's interest. But she seemed not to hear a word. Toulon. 10-minute stop. Buffet, cried the conductor. Paul gestured for me to step out, and as soon as we were on the platform, he asked, "Tell me, who do you think she is?" I laughed. "I've no idea. And frankly, I couldn't care less. He was visibly stirred. She's devilishly pretty, fresh, a little minx. And those eyes. But she looks displeased. Something's bothering her, she seems oblivious to everything. I grumbled. You're wasting your time. He flared up. I'm not trying anything, my dear fellow. I simply find her very attractive, that's all. But what if I spoke to her? The question is, about what? Give me a suggestion. Who do you think she is? Honestly, I don't know. Perhaps a little actress returning to her troupe after a romantic escapade. He took offense at once, as if I'd insulted her, and retorted. Why would you say that? I, on the contrary, think she's a perfectly respectable woman. I replied. My dear, look at her bracelets, her earrings, her whole outfit. I wouldn't be surprised if she turned out to be a dancer, or even a circus rider. Though most likely, a dancer. There's something theatrical in her bearing. He clearly disliked that idea. She's too young, no more than 20. But my dear, one can accomplish quite a lot by 20. Dancing, recitation, and many other things she may well be engaged in. Expressed nice, Ventimiglia. Take your seats, shouted the conductor. We had to return to the carriage. Our fellow passenger was eating an orange. Her manners were, indeed, far from refined. She spread a handkerchief across her lap, and the way she peeled the golden skin, opened her mouth, seized the slices with her lips, and spat the seeds out the window betrayed her rustic habits and gestures. She frowned even more deeply and devoured the orange with such vehemence it was almost comical. Paul devoured her with his eyes, feverishly inventing ways to attract her attention, to stir her interest. He resumed speaking to me, uttering elegant thoughts, casually name-dropping celebrities. But she remained unmoved, not the slightest sign of attention. We passed Phrygius, St. Raphael. The train raced through lush gardens, through a paradise of roses, among groves of blooming orange and lemon trees, laden at once with white blossoms and golden fruit, along a fragrant kingdom, along the enchanting coast from Marseille to Genoa. This land, where magnificent flowers grow freely and wildly in narrow valleys and on hillside slopes, is best visited in June. Wherever you look, roses, fields, hedges, thickets. They climb walls, bloom on rooftops, scale trees, sparkle among the foliage, white, crimson, yellow, small and large, delicate like simple dresses, or fleshy, in heavy, opulent gowns. Their continuous, powerful fragrance thickens the air, filling it with languor. And the sharper scent of blooming orange trees sweetens the breath, turning the air into a luscious confection. The coastline, bathed by the still Mediterranean Sea, stretches out with dark cliffs. The hot summer sun pours down in a fiery veil over the mountains, the sandy slopes, the heavy, motionless blue of the sea. And the train keeps rushing on, plunging into tunnels, skimming past capes, gliding over hills, racing above the water on sheer ledges, while the light, briny scent of drying seaweed occasionally mingles with the strong, intoxicating aroma of flowers. But Paul noticed none of it. He neither saw nor felt, his entire attention was consumed by the traveler. In Cannes, eager to speak again, he signaled me to step out. As soon as we were on the platform, he took my arm. Look at her eyes. And that hair. My dear fellow, I've never seen hair like that. I said. Calm down. Or if you're set on it, act. She doesn't look particularly unapproachable, though she does seem rather irritable. He went on. Couldn't you speak to her? I get flustered. At first, I'm always terribly shy. I've never known how to approach a woman on the street. I follow her, circle around, come close, and find no words. Once I tried to start a conversation. I saw she was waiting, that something had to be said, and I mumbled, "How do you do, madam?" She laughed in my face, and I ran. I promised Paul I'd summon all my eloquence to strike up a conversation, and once we were seated again, I politely addressed our fellow passenger. "Madam, does tobacco smoke bother you?" She replied. "Non capisco." She was Italian. I was seized by a wild fit of laughter. Paul didn't know a single word of Italian, so I had to assume the role of interpreter. I got to work and repeated the question in her language. I wanted to ask, "Madam, does tobacco smoke disturb you?" She snapped back. "Che mifa?" She didn't even turn her head or look at me. I couldn't tell whether this, "What do I care?" was permission, refusal, or simply, "Leave me alone." I tried to clarify. "If the smoke bothers you even a little." She replied, "Micah," in a tone that seemed to say, "Don't pester me." Yet it sounded like permission, so I told Paul, "You can smoke." He stared at me in confusion, the way people do when they hear a language they don't understand, and asked, "What did you say to her?" I asked if we could smoke. "She doesn't speak French at all?" "Not a word." "And what did she say?" "That we can do whatever we please." I lit a cigar. Paul continued. "That's all she said?" "My dear, if you count her words, you'll see there were exactly 6. 2 of them were her admission that she doesn't speak French. That leaves 4. And in 4 words, you'll agree, there's not much one can express." Paul looked utterly bewildered, disappointed, as though his hopes had collapsed. But suddenly the Italian woman, in that same disgruntled tone that seemed habitual, asked, "Do you know what time we arrive in Genoa?" 11 o'clock tonight, madam," I replied. After a brief pause, I added, "My friend and I are also going to Genoa, and we'd be very glad to be of any help along the way." She didn't respond, so I continued. "You're traveling alone. If you need assistance." She cut me off again with her sharp mica, and I fell silent. Paul asked, "What did she say?" "That she finds you utterly charming." He didn't appreciate the joke and curtly asked me not to mock him. So I translated her question and my offer, which had been met with such sternness. He was fidgeting like a squirrel in a cage. "If we could find out which hotel she's staying at, we could go there too. Try to find out. Invent some excuse to talk to her." But that was easier said than done. I myself wanted to know more about her, but couldn't find the right pretext. We passed Nice, Monaco, Menton. The train stopped at the border for baggage inspection. Though I detest those who eat breakfast in train carriages, I stocked up on provisions, hoping to resort to the final strategy, appealing to her appetite. I had a feeling that in ordinary circumstances she'd be far more agreeable. Something was clearly bothering her now, but perhaps one guessed desire, one well-chosen word, could melt the ice, summon a smile, and win her over. The train moved on. We were still 3. I laid out our supplies on the bench, carefully sliced the chicken, arranged the ham, and placed the dessert, strawberries, plums, cherries, pastries, and sweets, deliberately closer to her. Seeing us begin our meal, she pulled out a pouch containing chocolate and 2 hard rolls, and began gnawing on the crusty bread and chocolate bar with her beautiful, sharp teeth. Paul whispered, "Offer her something." "I'm just about to, dear. But timing is everything." Meanwhile, our neighbor was sneaking glances at our spread. I realized her modest meal hadn't satisfied her. I gave her time to finish, then said, "Would you do us the honor, madam, of trying these berries?" She said, "Mica" again, but not with the same sharpness. I continued, "Then allow me to offer you a little wine. You haven't had anything to drink. It's Italian wine, wine from your homeland. And since we're on Italian soil, it would please us greatly if a lovely Italian mouth accepted a gift from her French neighbors." She shook her head slightly, stubbornly, but less firmly than before, and repeated her "Mica" almost politely. I took the straw-covered bottle, poured the wine into glasses, and handed her one. "Drink," I said, "let this be a toast to your return home." She took the glass with a disgruntled look, drained it in one gulp as if parched, and handed it back without a word of thanks. Then I offered her cherries. "Please, madam. You see how pleased we'd be if you accepted our invitation." She looked over the fruit laid out beside her and spoke so quickly I could barely make out the words. "I don't like cherries or plums," she said. "I only like strawberries." "What did she say?" Paul asked at once. "She says she doesn't care for cherries or plums, only strawberries." I placed the newspaper with strawberries on her lap. She immediately began eating them with astonishing speed, deftly picking them up with the tips of her fingers and tossing them into her mouth, which opened with a coquettish and rather charming motion. When she had finished the red mound, vanishing before our eyes under her nimble fingers, I asked, "May I offer you anything else?" She replied without hesitation, "I'd love a piece of chicken." And she truly devoured nearly half the bird, biting off large chunks with the appetite of a predator. Then, despite her earlier words, she took a few cherries, then some plums, then a pastry, and finally said, "Enough," retreating once more into her corner. I was beginning to find her amusing. I tried to coax her into eating more, doubling my courtesies and offerings, hoping to prolong the meal. But she suddenly flared up again and hurled a fierce "Mica" at me, so sharp I didn't dare disturb her digestion any further. I turned to Paul. "Poor fellow, I think our efforts were in vain. Night was slowly descending, southern, warm, full of languid shadows stretching across the scorched and weary land. In the distance, here and there, lights flickered on the capes and peaks of the coastal cliffs, and on the darkening horizon, stars began to shimmer, some of which I mistook for lighthouse beacons. The scent of orange blossoms grew richer, and we inhaled it deeply, with pleasure, filling our lungs. There was a kind of unearthly tenderness in the air, as if nature itself were caressing us with its breath. And then, beneath the trees along the tracks, in the thickening dusk, I saw something like a shower of stars. Tiny drops of light danced and flitted among the leaves, little stars that had descended from the heavens to play upon the earth. Fireflies, glowing insects, were performing their strange, flickering ballet in the fragrant air. One firefly flew into the carriage, fluttering with its intermittent glow, now flashing, now fading. I drew the blue curtain over the lamp and watched the fantastic creature dart about, following the whims of its fiery flight. Suddenly, it settled on the black hair of our fellow passenger, who had fallen asleep after dinner. Paul froze, enchanted, his eyes fixed on the shimmering dot that sparkled on her forehead like a living jewel. The Italian woman awoke at 11:15. The firefly was still nestled in her hair. Seeing her stir, I said, "We're approaching Genoa, madam." She didn't reply, but murmured, as if tormented by a persistent thought, "What am I to do now?" Then suddenly she asked, "Would you like me to come with you?" I was so stunned I didn't immediately grasp the meaning of her words. "What do you mean, come with us? What are you suggesting?" She repeated, now with irritation. "Would you like me to come with you now?" "Of course. But where exactly do you want to go? Where should I take you?" She shrugged with indifference. "Wherever you like. It doesn't matter to me." And she repeated twice, "C'mifa? But we're heading to a hotel." She tossed back disdainfully. "Well then, let's go to the hotel." I turned to Paul. "She's asking if we want her to come with us." Paul was dumbfounded, which helped me regain my composure. He muttered, "With us? Where? Why? How? I don't understand it myself." She made this strange offer with irritation. I said we were going to a hotel, and she replied, "Well then, let's go." Maybe she's completely out of money. But whatever the case, she certainly has a unique way of making acquaintances. Paul, excited and flustered, exclaimed, "Of course I agree. Tell her we'll take her wherever she wants to go." Then, after a pause, he added nervously, "But we should find out which one of us she wants to go with, you or me." I turned to the Italian woman, who had once again sunk into her usual indifference and seemed not to be listening to us at all. "We'd be delighted to take you with us, madam. But my friend would like to know whose arm, mine or his, you'd prefer to lean on." She looked at me, her large black eyes wide with mild surprise, and said, "C'mifa?" I explained. "As I understand it, in Italy, the gentleman who takes care of a lady's every wish, who fulfills her whims and caprices, is called a patito. Which of us would you like to choose as your patito?" Without hesitation, she replied, "You." I turned to Paul. "Bad luck, my dear. She's chosen me." He grumbled, "Good for you." Then, after a moment's thought, he added, "So you really intend to take her with us? She'll ruin the whole trip. What are we supposed to do with a woman who could be anyone? No decent hotel will let us in." But, as fate would have it, I was beginning to like her more and more. And now I felt a distinct desire, yes, a desire, to take her with me. The thought thrilled me, and I felt that subtle tremor of anticipation that runs through the veins in expectation of a night of love. I replied, "My dear fellow, we've already agreed. It's too late to back out. You were the one who first suggested we give her a positive answer." He grumbled, "What nonsense. Well, do as you please." The train whistled, slowed down, we had arrived. I stepped out first and helped my new companion down. She hopped lightly onto the platform, and when I offered her my hand, she took it with an air of reluctant displeasure. Once we retrieved the luggage, we headed into town. Paul walked beside us, silent and tense. I asked, "Where shall we stay? It feels awkward to show up at the Hotel de Paris with a lady, especially this Italian one." Paul interrupted, "Exactly, an Italian who looks more like a streetwalker than a duchess. But I don't care. Do as you like." I was at a loss. I had written ahead to the Hotel de Paris, asking them to reserve rooms for us, but now I wasn't sure what to do. 2 porters were dragging our suitcases behind us. I continued. You ought to go ahead. Tell them we'll be arriving shortly. Hint to the innkeeper that I'm with a companion, and we'd prefer separate rooms, away from the other guests. He'll understand, and based on his reaction, we'll decide what to do. But Paul cut me off. Thanks, but I'm not here to arrange your pleasures or your accommodations. I tried to persuade him. Don't be cross, dear. Better to settle into a respectable hotel than a shady one. What's so hard about asking for 3 separate rooms and a dining table? I emphasized 3, and that seemed to convince him. He went ahead, and I watched him enter the grand entrance of the elegant hotel while I, on the opposite side of the street, led the silent Italian woman by the arm, the porters trailing behind us. Eventually, Paul returned. His face was as grim as my companion's. They'll give us rooms, he said, but only 2. You sort it out. I followed him, feeling awkward about entering the hotel with such a questionable lady. They had indeed given us 2 rooms, connected by a small sitting room. I asked for a cold supper to be brought up and, slightly embarrassed, turned to the Italian woman. We've only managed to get 2 rooms, madam. Please choose whichever suits you. She replied with her usual, "Chmifa." I picked up her small black wooden case, a maid's trunk, really, and carried it into the right-hand room, the one I'd chosen for her, for us. On a scrap of paper glued to the lid was written in French, Mademoiselle Francesca Rondoli, Genoa. I asked, "Is your name Francesca?" She didn't answer, just nodded. I continued. "We'll be dining shortly. Perhaps you'd like to freshen up?" She repeated her familiar mica, a word she used almost as often as chmifa. I insisted. After a journey, it's pleasant to freshen up a bit. It seemed she didn't have the necessary things with her, as if she were in a difficult situation or had just escaped some unpleasant affair. I brought her my travel kit. I laid out everything inside, a nail brush, a new toothbrush. I always carry a full set, scissors, files, sponges. I uncorked a bottle of lavender water and another with the scent of freshly cut hay, offering her a choice. I opened a box of powder with a soft puff. I hung one of my fine towels over the pitcher and placed a fresh bar of soap beside the basin. She watched my preparations with large, angry eyes. My efforts seemed to provoke neither surprise nor gratitude. I said, "Here's everything you might need. When supper is ready, I'll come fetch you." I returned to the sitting room. Paul had taken the second room and locked himself in, leaving me to wait alone. The servant came and went, bringing dishes. He slowly set the table, placed the cold chicken, and announced that everything was ready. I knocked gently on Mademoiselle Rondoli's door. She called out, "Come in." I entered, and was enveloped in a thick, pungent cloud of perfume, as if I'd stepped into a barber's shop. The Italian woman sat on her trunk in the pose of a disappointed dreamer, or a dismissed maid. At a glance, it was clear her idea of freshening up was rather unconventional. The towel hung untouched on the pitcher, the water remained still, the soap lay dry beside the empty basin. But it seemed she had poured half the bottles of perfume over herself. The cologne was barely touched, only a third gone, but she hadn't spared the lavender water or the hay-scented vial. Her face and neck were so heavily powdered that a pale mist hung in the air. Her lashes, brows, and temples looked dusted with snow. The powder lay on her cheeks like plaster, filling every hollow, the wings of her nose, the dimple in her chin, the corners of her eyes. When she rose, the room was instantly flooded with such a sharp, overpowering scent that I felt the onset of a migraine. We sat down to supper. Paul was in a vile mood. Nothing could be drawn from him but grumbling, biting remarks, and barbed pleasantries. Mademoiselle Francesca ate with an appetite as if we were seated before a bottomless abyss. After the meal, she dozed off on the sofa. But I felt the decisive moment approaching, the matter of room arrangements. Not wanting to delay, I walked over and gallantly kissed her hand. She half opened her weary eyes and gave me her usual disgruntled, sleepy look from beneath lowered lids. I said, "Since we have only 2 rooms, would you mind if I stayed in yours?" She replied, "Do as you please. I don't care." Chmifa? Her indifference stung me. "So you wouldn't mind if I stayed with you?" "I don't care. As you wish. Would you like to go to bed?" "Yes, I'm terribly sleepy." She stood, yawned, extended her hand to Paul, who shook it with visible irritation, and I escorted her to our room, lighting the way. But unease still gripped me. "This is everything you might need," I repeated, trying to be attentive. I poured water from the pitcher into the basin myself, laid the towel beside the soap. Then I returned to Paul. I had barely crossed the threshold when he said, "What a piece of trash you've dragged in." I laughed. "My dear friend, don't say the grapes are sour." He added with a sneer, "Just make sure those grapes don't make you sick." I shuddered. That familiar anxiety seized me, the kind that haunts us after dubious romantic encounters. The kind that poisons even the most enchanting meetings, the fleeting caresses, the kisses snatched in passing. But I tried to stay cheerful. "Oh, come on. She's not a tramp." But now I was in his power. He saw the shadow of doubt on my face. "You know nothing about her. Your knave astounds me. You pick up an Italian woman traveling alone, and with astonishing cynicism she offers to spend the night with you in the first hotel you find. You take her with you. And then you claim she's not a street girl. Do you seriously think you're not exposing yourself to the same danger as if you were climbing into bed with someone infected with smallpox?" He laughed, a bitter, irritated laugh. I sat down, tormented by doubt. What should I do? He was right. A battle had begun within me, desire against fear. He continued. "Do as you wish. I've warned you. Just don't come crying later." But in his eyes I saw such cruel irony, such satisfaction in revenge, such brazen mockery that I stopped hesitating. I extended my hand. "Good night," I said. "And by God, victory is worth the risk. Where there is no danger, there is no glory." I stepped resolutely into Francesca's room. I stopped at the threshold, stunned and enchanted. She was already asleep, completely naked. Sleep had overtaken her mid-undressing, and she lay in a pose worthy of Titian's brush. It seemed fatigue had conquered her, and she had lain down while removing her stockings. They lay there, on the sheet. Then, perhaps recalling something pleasant, she had slowed her movements, closed her eyes, and drifted off. The nightgown, embroidered at the collar and bought from a ready-to-wear shop, a beginner's luxury, was tossed over a chair. She was lovely, young, firm, fresh. What could be more beautiful than a sleeping woman? That body, with its tender contours, its alluring curves, its soft roundness, seemed made to rest in bed. The undulating line dipping at the waist, rising at the hip, then gently descending along the leg and finishing coquettishly at the tips of the toes, all this can be seen in its full, exquisite charm only upon the sheets. For a moment, I was ready to forget all warnings. But turning toward the dressing table, I noticed everything was exactly as I had left it. I sat down, seized by anxiety, tormented by indecision. I must have sat there a long time, perhaps an hour, unable to take a step forward or back. Leaving was out of the question. I could either spend the night in the chair or lie down in bed at my own risk. But in either case, sleep was impossible. My thoughts were too agitated, my eyes too occupied. I tossed and turned, feverish, unable to find rest, overwhelmed with excitement. At last, I gave in. Lying down doesn't commit me to anything. At the very least, a bed is more comfortable than a chair. I undressed slowly, climbed over the sleeping figure, and stretched out along the wall, turning my back to temptation. And so I lay there, for a long time, a very long time, unable to sleep. Suddenly, my companion stirred. She opened her eyes, surprised, and as always, displeased. Then, noticing she was lying naked, she calmly rose and began putting on her nightdress, as if I weren't in the room at all. So then, damn it, I seized the moment, which, evidently, didn't trouble her in the slightest. She peacefully fell asleep again, her head resting on her right arm. I lay awake for a long time, pondering human weakness and folly. Only later did sleep finally take me. She rose early, like a woman accustomed to waking with the dawn. In doing so, she inadvertently woke me, and I watched her through half-closed eyes. She wandered slowly about the room, as if puzzled by having nothing to do. Then she approached the dressing table and, in a single motion, poured the remaining contents of every perfume bottle over herself. She used a bit of water too, but sparingly. Dressed, she sat on her trunk, wrapped her arms around one knee, and fell into thought. I pretended to have just woken and said, "Good morning, Francesca." She seemed no more cheerful than the day before and muttered, "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" She didn't answer, just nodded. I jumped out of bed and approached to kiss her. She reluctantly offered her face, like a child being kissed against its will. I embraced her gently. Since the wine is poured, one might as well drink, and slowly brushed my lips against her sulky eyes, which she closed with irritation, her fresh cheeks, her full lips, which she tried to hide from my kiss. "Don't you like being kissed?" I asked. "Micah," she replied. I sat beside her on the edge of the trunk and slipped my hand under her elbow. "Micah. Micah. Everything with you is Micah. From now on, I'll call you Mademoiselle Micah." For the first time, I thought I saw a flicker of a smile on her lips. But it vanished so quickly, I may have imagined it. "But if you always answer, Micah, I'll never know how to entertain you, how to please you. For instance, what shall we do today?" She hesitated, as if a flicker of desire stirred within her, and then said indifferently, "I don't care. Do whatever you like." "Excellent, Mademoiselle Micah. Then let's take a carriage ride." She grumbled. "As you wish." Paul was waiting for us in the dining room, wearing the bored expression of the third wheel in a love story. I put on a radiant face and shook his hand with the triumphant energy of a man making a declaration. He asked, "What are you planning to do?" "First, a stroll through the city. Then we'll take a carriage and explore the surroundings." Breakfast passed in silence. Then we went to visit museums. I led Francesca by the arm from one palace to another. We saw the Palazzo Spinola, Doria, Marcello Durazzo, the red and white palaces. She showed no interest, occasionally casting a lazy, indifferent glance at the masterpieces. Paul trudged behind us, grumbling. Later, we took a drive out of town, and the whole way we remained silent. We returned and had dinner. The same routine repeated the next day. And the day after. On the third day, Paul said, "You know what? I'm leaving. I'm not going to sit here for 3 weeks watching you trail after that girl." I was taken aback. To my own surprise, I had grown strangely attached to Francesca. Man is weak and foolish, he becomes enamored with trifles, and when his sensuality is stirred, he becomes docile. I had grown fond of this girl I barely knew. Silent, perpetually displeased, she had captivated me. I liked her frowning face, her pouty lips, her bored gaze, her weary movements, her scornful compliance, her indifferent caresses. Invisible bonds, mysterious, animalistic, born of insatiable desire, held me close to her. I told Paul everything, honestly. He called me a fool, then said, "Well then, take her with you." But she flatly refused to leave Genoa and wouldn't explain why. I tried pleading, promising, nothing worked. So I stayed. Paul declared he was leaving alone. He even packed his suitcase. But he stayed too. 2 weeks passed. Francesca, still silent and sullen, lived more beside me than with me. To every request and suggestion, she responded with her eternal, Che Mifa, and equally eternal, Micah. Paul never stopped fuming. Whenever he exploded, I calmly replied, "If you're tired of being here, go. I'm not holding you." Then he'd start shouting, hurling reproaches. "Where do you expect me to go? We had only 3 weeks, 2 are gone. Now it's pointless to travel further. And I never intended to go to Venice, Florence, and Rome alone. But you'll pay for this, more dearly than you think. You shouldn't have dragged a man from Paris to Genoa just to lock him in a hotel with an Italian floozy." I replied calmly. "Well then, go back to Paris," I said. He flared up. "I will. And no later than tomorrow." But the next day, still fuming and cursing, he didn't leave, just as he hadn't the day before. By now, we were recognized in town, where we wandered aimlessly from morning till night through narrow streets without sidewalks, giving Genoa the feel of a vast stone labyrinth, carved with corridors that resembled underground passages. We roamed these alleys, swept by fierce drafts, hemmed in by walls so tall the sky was barely visible. French tourists we passed would sometimes turn and stare, surprised to see compatriots in the company of this bored, garishly dressed girl whose manners seemed odd, inappropriate, even compromising. She walked on my arm, showing no interest in anything. Why did she stay with us, if we seemed to bring her so little pleasure? Who was she? Where from? What did she live for? Did she have any plans, any intentions? Or was she simply drifting, living by chance encounters and passing episodes? I tried in vain to understand her, to decipher her, to explain her to myself. The more I got to know her, the more she seemed a mystery. She was certainly not a woman who sold herself. More likely, a poor girl, seduced, taken away by deception, ruined and abandoned. But what was she hoping for? What did she expect? She made no effort to win me over, nor to gain anything from me. I tried asking her questions, spoke of childhood, of family. She remained silent. And I stayed, emotionally free, but physically captive, unable to stop embracing this sullen, magnificent creature, joining with her like an animal, driven by passion, or rather overcome by a sensual charm, young, healthy, powerful, that emanated from her fragrant skin, from the firm lines of her body. Another week passed. My trip was nearing its end. I was due back in Paris on July 11th. Paul had more or less resigned himself to the situation, though he continued to grumble. I, meanwhile, did everything I could to invent amusements and outings, trying to please both my lover and my friend, stretching myself thin. One day I suggested we visit Santa Margherita, a charming little town nestled in gardens at the foot of a rocky coast that juts into the sea all the way to Portofino. The three of us set off along the winding scenic road that hugs the mountain. Suddenly Francesca said, "Tomorrow I won't be able to walk with you. I'm going to visit my family." And fell silent. I didn't press her, I knew there'd be no answer. The next morning, she did indeed rise very early. I was still in bed when she sat at my feet and said shyly, "If I don't come back tonight, will you come for me?" "Of course." "Where?" She began to explain. "Go down via Vittorio Emanuele, turn into the Falcone Arcade, then into the San Raffaele Alley. There's a furniture dealer's house. In the right wing, at the back of the courtyard, ask for Madame Rondoli. I'll be there." And she left. I found it strange. Paul, seeing me alone, asked, "Where's Francesca?" I told him everything. He exclaimed, "Well, my dear, let's seize the moment and make our escape. It's time anyway. 2 days won't make a difference. Come on. Pack your bags." I refused. "But my dear, I can't just abandon her after living with her for nearly 3 weeks. I have to say goodbye, offer her something. Otherwise I'm just a scoundrel." He wouldn't listen, kept urging me, wouldn't let up. But I stood firm. All day I stayed in, waiting for Francesca to return. She didn't. At dinner, Paul was triumphant. "She's left you, my dear." Well, well. How amusing. Utterly amusing. I admit I was surprised, and a little hurt. He laughed in my face, sneered. "A simple but clever trick, wait for me, I'll be back tonight." "And how long do you plan to wait? Or are you naive enough to go looking for her at that address? Madame Rondoli? No such person, sir." "I bet you'll go." I replied. "No, dear friend, I assure you, if she doesn't return by morning, I'll leave at 8 on the express train. I'll wait exactly 1 day. That's enough. My conscience will be clear." All evening I felt uneasy, a little melancholy, a little anxious. Truthfully, I had grown attached to her. At midnight I went to bed, but slept poorly. At 6 I was already up. I woke Paul, packed my suitcase, and 2 hours later, we were on our way to France. Exactly 1 year later, at the same time, I was seized again by the urge to go to Italy, as if struck by a bout of intermittent fever. I decided at once to set off. After all, for an educated man, seeing Venice, Florence, and Rome is a necessity. Besides, it provides endless topics for conversation in society and the chance to utter well-worn phrases about art that always sound impressively profound. This time I traveled alone and arrived in Genoa at precisely the same hour as the year before, though without any of the previous travel misadventures. I stayed at the same hotel and, by strange coincidence, was given the very same room. But the moment I lay down, the memory of Francesca, already hovering vaguely in my mind the day before, began to haunt me with startling persistence. Do you know that obsessive feeling, when the image of a woman you once loved and held in your arms suddenly comes alive upon returning to the place where it all happened? It is one of the most powerful and tormenting sensations I've ever experienced. It feels as though she might walk in at any moment, smiling, arms open. Her image, fragile yet vivid, appears before your eyes, then slips away, possesses you, fills your heart, stirs your senses with its ghostly presence. You seem to hear her voice, smell her perfume, taste her kisses, feel the touch of her skin. You are alone, clearly, but a strange agitation overtakes you, born of this phantom. And your soul is gripped by a dull, wrenching sorrow. Everything around you takes on a somber hue, reminding you of oblivion and solitude. Oh, never return to the place where you once loved, the city, the house, the room, the forest, the garden, the very bench. All night I was tormented by memories of Francesca, and gradually the desire to see her again took hold of me, first faint, then sharp, burning. I decided to stay in Genoa one more day and try to find her. If I failed, I would leave on the evening train. In the morning, I set out in search. I remembered her directions perfectly, given at our parting, via Vittorio Emanuele, the Falcone Arcade, San Rafael Alley, the furniture dealer's house, the right wing at the back of the courtyard. I found the way, though not immediately, and knocked on the door of an old, dilapidated building. A stout woman opened it, once, perhaps, strikingly beautiful, now simply strikingly unkempt. Despite her excessive bulk, something regal lingered in her features. Strands of disheveled hair fell across her forehead and shoulders, and beneath a wide, stained housecoat her flabby body swayed. Around her neck hung a massive gilded necklace, on her wrists, splendid Geno's filigree bracelets. She asked curtly, "What do you want?" I replied, "Does Mademoiselle Francesca Rondoli live here? What do you want with her? I had the honor of meeting her last year and would like to see her again." The old woman studied me suspiciously. "Where did you meet her?" "Here, in Genoa." "What's your name?" I hesitated briefly, then gave it. And as soon as I spoke, she clapped her hands as if about to embrace me. "Oh, so it's you. The Frenchman. How glad I am to see you. But you so upset the poor girl. She waited for you a whole month, sir, a whole month. That first day, she was sure you'd come. She needed to know, did you love her or not? Oh, if only you knew how she cried when she realized you weren't coming back. Yes, sir, she cried her eyes out. Then she went to the hotel, but you were already gone. She thought you'd traveled further through Italy and would return on your way back. She didn't want to go with you right away, you see. And she waited more than a month, missed you terribly. I'm her mother." I admit, I was taken aback. "But recovering?" I asked. "And is she here now?" "No, sir, she's in Paris, with an artist, a wonderful young man who loves her dearly, sir, absolutely adores her. He gives her everything she wants. Look what she sent me, her mother. Beautiful, isn't it?" And with southern exuberance, she showed off wide bracelets and a heavy necklace. She continued, "I also have earrings with stones, a silk dress, rings. But I don't wear them in the morning, only when I go out. She's very happy now, sir, very. Oh, she'll be thrilled to hear you stopped by. Come in, sir, please sit down. Have something to drink." I declined, I wanted to leave on the next train. But she grabbed my hand and pulled me inside, saying, "Come in, sir, I'll be sure to write and tell her you were here." And I found myself in a small, rather dark room with a plain table and a few chairs. The Italian woman spoke again. "She's very happy now, very. When you met her on the train, she was heartbroken. Her boyfriend had left her in Marseille. She was coming home alone, poor thing. She liked you right away, but she was still grieving. Now she wants for nothing, she writes to me about everything. His name is Monsieur Belmen. They say he's a well-known artist in your country. He met her right on the street, yes, sir, and fell in love instantly. But won't you have a glass of syrup? It's very good syrup. And you, are you all alone this year?" "Yes, quite alone," I replied. After Madame Rondoli's story, my initial disappointment gradually faded, and I began to feel an increasingly persistent urge to laugh. I had no choice but to drink the syrup. She went on, "So you really are alone? Ah, what a pity Francesca isn't here anymore, she would have kept you company while you're in town. It's no fun strolling by yourself, she'll be terribly sorry too." As I rose from the table, she suddenly exclaimed, "Would you like Carlotta to go with you? She knows all the best walking spots. That's my second daughter, sir, the second." She clearly mistook my surprise for agreement, and rushing to the door, called into the shadowy stairwell, "Carlotta! Carlotta! Come down, darling, quickly, quickly." I tried to protest, but she insisted. "No, no, she'll keep you company. She's very easygoing and much livelier than the other one. A good girl, wonderful, I love her dearly." I heard the shuffle of slippers on the stairs, and a tall, slender girl with black hair appeared, pretty, though a bit tousled. Beneath her mother's old dress, one could glimpse a young, supple figure. Madame Rondoli immediately brought her up to speed. "This is Francesca's Frenchman, remember? From last year. He came looking for her, but now, poor thing, he's all alone. I told him you'd go with him so he wouldn't be bored. Carlotta looked at me with her lovely brown eyes, smiled, and whispered softly. If he wants, I'd be happy to. How could I refuse? I said. Of course, I'd be delighted. Madame Rondoli nudged her toward the door. Go get dressed, quickly now. Put on the blue dress and the hat with flowers, and don't dawdle. When Carlotta left, she explained. I have 2 more daughters, but they're younger. Oh, sir, it costs a fortune to raise 4 girls. Thank goodness the eldest is settled now. Then she began telling me about her life, her late husband who had worked for the railway, and the virtues of her second daughter, Carlotta. The girl soon returned, dressed in a bright and slightly ridiculous outfit, in the style of her sister. Her mother looked her over from head to toe, nodded with satisfaction, and said, Well then, off you go, my children. Then she turned to her daughter. Be back before 10. You know the door will be locked. Don't worry, Mama, Carlotta replied. She took my arm, and we set off through the streets, just as I had done a year before with her sister. By breakfast, I was back at the hotel, and later I took my new companion to Santa Margherita, retracing the same walk I had once taken with Francesca. And that evening, she didn't return home, knowing full well the door would be locked after 10. During the 2 weeks I had left, I wandered with Carlotta through the hills around Genoa. She gave me not a single reason to regret her sister. On the day of my departure, I said goodbye. She was in tears, and left her a gift, and presented her mother with 4 bracelets. In the coming days, I plan to return to Italy, and I must confess, with a touch of apprehension but also with hope, I find myself wondering whether Madame Rondoli still has 2 daughters left.